Friday, TGIF. My name is Gil Diaz. I'm the Media and Public Relations Director of the Los Angeles LGBT Center. I'm also a very proud member of AIDS LifeCycle's media team for the past 7 years. Now, I know you didn't drop everything this afternoon to see or hear from me, but you're here to see a legendary figure of the AIDS LifeCycle community. For us seasoned participants and staff, this woman, she does it all with us. And for all our newbies this year on the ride, this is a woman that you want to meet and that you will never forget after you meet her. I am talking about the one and only Los Angeles LGBT Center CEO, Lorri Jean. Lorri, hello.
Hello, writers. Hello, roadies. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, I've been waiting for you, and I think a lot of people have been waiting for you to say that signature greeting of yours all this week. You know, it's day 6 of AIDS LifeCycle at home, Lorri. I wore this shirt. I want to show you. It's a show and tell. It's day 6. So we would have left Lompoc. We would have been on our way to Ventura. Right now, we probably would have been at the lunch stop right now in Goleta in Santa Barbara County. I love that lunch stop. In fact, I love that route from Lompoc to Ventura.
Yes, this day is, every day on the ride is gorgeous. We travel through such beautiful California countryside, but I always liked this day because when I was riding that Goleta Pass, when you go down, oh my God, I would get going so fast. That's where my weight and gravity became my friend. And I would pass everybody on that downhill. And then once you get over onto the coastline, oh my God, it's stunningly gorgeous. And the Paradise Pit in Santa Barbara is so fabulous. So this is always a fun day on the ride.
Well, Lorri, thanks for joining us during this lunchtime hour on this Friday. And for those of you, if you know Lorri, she has some great stories. She's one of the best storytellers I've ever met in my life. And she has some great anecdotes of the ride to share with us in a few minutes. So if you're watching us from Twitch or Facebook Live, you can also communicate to Lorri and ask her any questions that you have on your mind. She is with us within this hour, so that's going to be exciting. But first, I do need to pivot and address something a little bit more serious before we get to the fun of this. We have to address what's happening in our country right now. Lorri, as well as Joe Holland-Donor from San Francisco AIDS Foundation, on Sundays, if you watched the opening ceremony, they had a message about Black Lives Matter. Now, since Sunday, a lot of things have happened nationwide. We've had peaceful protests, we've had riots, we've had looting. Yesterday was George Floyd's memorial service in Minneapolis. Earlier this week, in fact, we have some photos, I think, of some of the peaceful protesters who marched in front of the center's flagship facility known as the Anita Mae Rosenstein campus. There we go. We have some staff right there who actually rooted for the peaceful protesters along Santa Monica Boulevard. As we're seeing these pictures, Lorri, could you believe what's happening right now in our country?
Sadly, yes, I certainly can believe it. In fact, in a way, it's shocking that it hasn't happened before. The senseless violence, racist violence, anti-Black violence against so many in our country, and especially by law enforcement, is nothing new. But for some reason, now in this particular time, it has prompted not only a national outcry, but an international outcry. And so I, for one, have been very, very happy to see it. Not happy to see the violence or the looting, but happy to see so many people, such a diverse crowd speaking up, demanding change. And when all is said and done, my fondest wish is that this will actually become what now you're seeing some political leaders talk about, a real pivotal moment for our nation. And I know that here in Los Angeles, the mayor has promised to do some work around police reform. And I imagine the same thing is happening in San Francisco and other cities around the country where so many of our writers and roadies live. And the center is going to get significantly involved in those efforts in Los Angeles to make sure that they are properly inclusive of our community and to support other progressive organizations, including Black Lives Matter, as we try to make a much needed change in our city and in our nation.
Well, Lorri, I'm going to put you in the hot seat right now. Immediately after George Floyd's murder, you actually wrote something on social media. It's also published on the center's blog site, lgbtnewsnow.org. You wrote an essay, and I want to quote what the very first line you wrote, quote, "I don't ever want to hear another white person say, but all lives matter." That is not the point. The point is that Black lives are devalued in our nation in a uniquely terrible and tragic way. That's quite a bold statement, Lorri.
Well, maybe. I know it seems pretty sad to me to think that it's bold because, a lot more people need to be saying that. And, part of this is about educating people. Some of my friends or acquaintances who've made those kinds of statements to me are well-intentioned, but they need to understand what the real issue is here. And I was so distraught by the series of events that led up to and then including George Floyd's murder that I just felt a need to speak out in that way. And as a white person who has not experienced what a Black person or other people of color experience, that was how I felt that I could help contribute to the dialogue. And and many other folks have done so too. And we all need to do so. I don't think I've ever seen a kind of outpouring from corporate America that I have seen in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. And that's a good thing. We just now have to make sure we capitalize upon this momentum to make real and lasting change.
Lorri, how many times would you have your white colleagues, your white friends actually say that, but all lives matter? And how would you respond to that?
It would depend upon the context. I wasn't as angry as I was in my piece saying, I don't ever want to hear you say that again. I would try to explain to them from a vantage point that I thought they could understand about why that's not the point. And, and I found for the most part, people appreciated the conversation and shifted their perspective.
And, you've been a leader, LGBTQ leader for many years, for decades. Do you believe there's really do you believe there is a commonality between the Black Lives Matter movement and LGBT equality movement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's like a Venn diagram, if you ask me. Mm-hmm. First of all, tons of LGBTQ people are Black. And those issues are our community's issues as well. Secondly, it's made me very proud that a number of the founders of Black Lives Matter identify as queer, and one of them is a Los Angelino, Patrisse Cullors, and we share many common goals. So I definitely feel that there's a synergy there. Plus, if our community has learned anything over the years, especially in the HIV and AIDS arena, it is that that epidemic has had a disproportionately horrible impact upon African Americans, upon gay and bisexual men of color, transgender people of color, especially trans women. It's no surprise when the bad things that happen to LGBTQ people in general have a disproportionate impact on the most disenfranchised, the most oppressed in our community, and that's people of color.
Right. I want to take a step further that, the Black Lives Matter is also intersects with AIDS LifeCycle's mission, because right now it's widely known that how HIV disproportionately impacts Black and gay gay and bisexual Black men, because 1 in 2 of them, if we don't do anything to curb the transmission rates, 50% of Black gay and bisexual men could turn up positive sometime in their lives.
That's right. And we've known that for a number of years. Mm-hmm. It has been alarming. We have tried to get government to respond. And in some instances, government really has responded. In LA County, we've had a very responsive Office of AIDS that has worked on these issues. Also in LA, where the Latino population is so large, those numbers can be 1 in 4. For the Latino population. And there's been at least one relatively small study that says that for trans women of color, the number is also about 50% will become positive in their lifetimes if there isn't intervention. And that's what the AIDS life cycle makes possible, is intervention with the spread of HIV, intervention with the treatment of HIV, and that's vital work. It has to continue. While AIDS is not nearly as horrible a problem in the United States as it was when we started this event in 1994, it is still a very serious issue, and the AIDS life cycle and the money that it raises makes these vital programs possible.
Well, thank you for speaking up, Lorri, because I'm an LGBT person of color, and for me, it feels good that you spoke up, because in that essay, you also said, I'm a white woman and there's privilege and power that comes with the color of my skin. So I'm so glad that you spoke up for Black lives recently.
Well, thank you, Gil. It's an expectation that ought to exist for all white people.
Now, we also have to address the other crisis that the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, the world has been experiencing these past few months, COVID-19. I'm going to call it the pandemic, because it damned us. The pandemic, it forced us to cancel the ride this year, the physical ride this year, for the very first time in the ride's history. When the health crisis unfolded, I know that the Los Angeles LGBT Center did not hesitate to remain open. Why is that, Lorri?
Well, the center from its earliest days, going back more than 50 years, has always been a frontline responder for our community. And pretty early on, that meant providing vital services that were critical to someone's ability to continue to live a healthy and happy life. So we did that during the AIDS epidemic. We developed entirely new systems of care that actually have revolutionized the nation and how medical care is provided. We had to do that because then we had a government that wasn't responsive at all, very unlike the government's response in the aftermath of COVID, or I guess it's not the aftermath yet, but since COVID arose. And so when this hit, well, the center, had no choice. It's in our DNA. Our clinic was perfectly poised not only to continue to care for people who rely upon us, who have HIV and AIDS or others, but to be ready to respond in the event of people with COVID infections who don't have insurance or don't feel that they have a place where they can go to get medical care, mental health services, where they are understood and respected. And so we had to stay open. And we also do a lot of housing. We have housing for low-income LGBT seniors. We have housing for LGBT youth experiencing homelessness. Well, we weren't going to stop that. And those populations were very at risk, especially the seniors. And so we had to keep doing what we were doing. And then we had the extra burden of, we had to do more, because there were new needs that were developing, and the center needed to respond.
Well, Lorri, can you give us an update on how the center is doing during this COVID-19 pandemic? I've heard, and I think you may have just mentioned this, that we avoided cutting programs and services but we also added to them.
Yeah. Well, this, as it has been for every nonprofit or for-profit, these have been challenging times. And there was a survey done of all California community clinics that just came out. I think it was last week. I sort of lose track of time in these particular days, but that looked at clinics across California and what's happening to them is very alarming. Huge percentages have had to dramatically cut salaries. Many have closed. In Los Angeles alone, we've had 51 community clinic sites close. And those clinics, too, are providing vital services to people. And we are one of the few places in Los Angeles that is an AIDS specialty clinic and that really understands providing services to LGBTQ people. And so, we just had to stay open, but that wasn't easy because our staff are scared too. Our frontline employees have been nervous about their own safety, about the safety of their loved ones and their families that they might come home and bring possible infection to. But I've been extremely proud of not only our frontline clinic staff, but our frontline senior services staff, our youth services staff. I mean, those in particular, and other staff who have risen to the occasion from other departments to help each of those arenas, so we could be there for our community. At the same time, we've lost millions and millions of dollars in funding. The AIDS LifeCycle being the biggest example. We had hoped to have a record-breaking year this year and bring in, maybe $18 million. Right now, we're just pushing $8 million, which is a phenomenal testament to our riders and roadies, but it's a big difference. And the way it works at both of our organizations is the fiscal year ends at the end of June. That's when, those last few months is when the vast majority of the money comes in. But we've been counting on it all year long and spending it all year long on HIV and AIDS related services to enable those vital services. And then when it doesn't come in, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And we have gone into debt, actually, to try to keep this going in the sense of, if we have to find a way to make this happen for now and go into debt, we'll do it. And hopefully we'll have a live ride next year that we can rebound back, like we hope will happen with everything in the country. And we will have made the right decision without having to cut any programs or services. And so I guess I've gone on for a long time. But
I was going to say, so what is the status of the center? Is it stable? Should we be a little worried?
I would say yes to both of those questions. The center is stable. We have worked very hard to build a stable organization with a strong balance sheet. It has been my opinion for several decades that is my responsibility as the CEO of this organization, to ensure that we are stable and that we can withstand the ups and downs that happen over the course of time for nonprofits in the economy, whatever. I mean, but who could have anticipated this convergence of circumstances that we're facing now? But I'm worried too. Because if the AIDS LifeCycle doesn't revive, we'll be having a very different conversation this time next year.
Well, good. And Lorri, you mentioned that some of our center colleagues and our volunteers have stepped up to the plate during this COVID-19 pandemic. There is a thing that the senior services created called the Hello Club. Yeah. Tell us more about the Hello Club. It sounds fun.
It is fun and it's creative and it's easy to implement if you have people who are willing to help. I mean, think about LGBT seniors. Seniors of any kind tend to be more isolated than younger folks. But LGBT seniors are 4 times more likely than their straight counterparts to live alone and to have no family to support them. And during the time of COVID, seniors are among the most at risk. So most seniors have locked themselves up tight in their apartments, their homes, whatever, and that has included ours. And that has meant that with no family or loved ones to support them, they need the center. And so the center has responded in a whole lot of ways, starting a very much more robust food program, a food pantry. We're doing grocery shopping for seniors, which we've never done before. But this, what was called Hello Club. I keep forgetting the name of it. The Hello Club was something that was targeted towards our seniors' mental health and helping them understand that they are not alone They have people who care about them. So we've asked volunteers who are willing to call our senior clients on a regular basis and just check in, have a conversation about what's going on in the world, help people not feel so isolated. And we put out the call to volunteers, and much to our delight, many staff raised their hands and said, "Hey, I want to do that. I'll help." So staff outside of senior services, and that makes me very proud. Just like we've started the new Pride Pantry. It's a new food pantry. We weren't doing this before, but food insecurity in the LGBT community has gone through the roof. By one report I read, half of everyone in Los Angeles has lost their job. Well, that means half of LGBT Angelenos have lost their jobs. And that means they can't afford any of their important expenses. So we have a food pantry going now that has the capacity to provide food to as many as 750 people a week in our community. And so far, with a lot of help and donations and stuff, we're managing to fund it. And we hope to be able to continue to do that as long as it's necessary.
And I love that Pride Pantry because, like you said, it is vital right now with unemployment so high. It's also heartening to see that local residents, small businesses in Los Angeles, and even corporations, big corporations, are also donating food products for our Pride Pantry.
Right. I mean, I think about American Airlines. I mean, think about how the airline industry is hurting right now. Mm-hmm. American has been a long-time supporter of the center. And they donated food products, juice products, all kinds of things that they're not now using to our Pride Pantry to help. And you just have to love that approach of people pulling together when they can.
And I also want to give a shout out to our students of our unique culinary arts program who every day have been prepping to-go meals for our seniors and our youth members. More than 600 meals every day.
I know, and that's amazing. And the people who are prepping it, in addition to our relatively small number of full-time culinary staff, mm-hmm. are youth and seniors who are participating in that program to learn how to get jobs or develop careers in the culinary arts sector. Yeah. And here they are in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of this pandemic of anti-Blackness and racism and violence. They're continuing to do their work and prepare meals for people who need it.
Well, Lorri, do you think the center could ever go back to a normal operations, or have we been impacted permanently? And you and I are video conferencing. We haven't actually seen each other face to face in months, but I mean, do you think we can go back to normal?
I guess I would say yes and no. I think we will go back to a much greater sense of normalcy once our science catches up with COVID. But I also think that probably the workplace, not just ours, but across the country and maybe the world, is changing. Is changing probably permanently. I'll give you one example. One of the things that we did once the shelter-in-place orders were issued was we switched to telemedicine and telemental health. So people could, via Zoom, meet with their therapist. And we learned some really interesting things. Well, the no-show rate to those appointments really dropped. And our mental health professionals have reported, as have clients, having some real breakthroughs during this period of time. And this is being seen around the country with those entities that have been able to switch to telemedicine like we have. And so, I think we'll probably be continuing a certain amount of telemedicine, telemental health, even when we don't have to. I also think so many staff who aren't frontline staff are working at home, and so far, mostly it seems to be working. So we'll have to be looking at that, as will employers, across the board. So I think there will be some permanent innovations, changes, and but I also think that there'll be a day when we can get back to a greater sense of normalcy, and And I can hardly wait for that day, like many of you I know.
I can hardly wait for that day too, Lorri. Thanks for giving us an update on the center. Now let's talk about the ride. A very fun topic that's always on my mind. Lorri, as I mentioned earlier, you have been with the ride since the very beginning. And when I say the very beginning, it's when we first started as California AIDS Ride. Describe what it was like on that very first California AIDS Ride.
Wow. Well, that was such a special ride. I mean, all the rides are special, but that one, it had never been done before. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, the leap of faith that everybody had to take to presume we could pull it off was huge. And we only had about a little over 500 people, 560 people or so, who participated in that first year. And we raised over $1 million. And as my grandmother would have said, that's when dollars were this big. And we were thrilled. And it was such a success. And this was when AIDS was the #1 cause of death of adults in our nation. So, the first ride was 1994. And it was such a success that we felt like, we start in San Francisco, we ride to LA, we need to invite a San Francisco partner in to join us. And the San Francisco AIDS Foundation was the partner that made sense. I had known of Pat Kristen. I don't think I had really met her at that point because I was pretty brand new to my job, but she was a long time executive director at the foundation. And we approached them and said, hey, look, we had this incredibly great thing happen. We've got capacity for more. Would you like to join us? And that way we can have a beneficiary in San Francisco and a beneficiary in LA. And I'll never forget Pat and one of her other, I think her CFO, Lance at the time, looked at us and said, well, what's the catch? And, there was no catch. We needed to work together to make a difference in the fight against AIDS. And that created what has become a truly invaluable and extraordinary partnership.
True. And Lorri, you've put your share of sweat equity on the ride. You've done the ride, at least twice?
3 times. Don't give me less credit than I deserve. 3 times. Yes, I wish I'd done it in the 90s when I was so much younger and thinner. But I didn't do it until, I think my first year was 2005. Mm-hmm. I hope I'm remembering that right. And I thought I knew everything there was to know about the ride because I had been on it for so many times, mm-hmm. and as a member of the crew, the staff, but until you actually ride, you don't really have the full perspective. And I have such great respect for our roadies and our riders, but to have been able to ride and go through that experience. Actually, it was some of the most wonderful times of my life, and I made some lifelong friendships out of it. People who took me under their wing and helped me train, and so yeah, I really.
And we just saw a photo of you on your recumbent bike.
Yes, I decided to go with comfort. As one of my friends says, no pain, no pain. That's my rule. Recumbents, you don't get any neuropathy, no neck problems, no butt butter. You don't have to worry about that. And people think they're slower, but they're wrong. All land speed records on bikes have been set on recumbent bikes, not trikes, but like the ones that I rode. And so if more people knew how comfortable they were and how speedy they were, they'd be riding them.
If all of you are just logging in to our lunchtime conversation with Lorri, I just want to remind you that Lorri is taking your questions. We'll try and get through as many of them as possible within the next few minutes. Lorri, shout out to our cyclists and roadies, because this year, we had to ask them to be virtual cyclists and roadies. I want to give shout out to all those people who committed to raising funds this year. You probably are not surprised by the dedication and the commitment of our participants.
Oh, no. I mean, the fact that hundreds of writers and roadies have kept raising money during a time when many in our ride community have lost their jobs, are having to stay at home, don't exactly know what their futures are going to hold, or many of their donors have. I mean, that's pretty darn phenomenal. It reflects the dedication that these participants have to ensuring that the vital services of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and the Los Angeles LGBT Center are continuing. And you know, and I love that. One of the things that I feel sad about that we're not having the live ride is, first of all, for many of us, that's a very special time all year. It's if the only time all year that we live in this almost utopian world where we're taking care of one another, and it can be very rejuvenating. For me, it's re-energizing and helps get me through the whole year. But I also think about how important the visibility of the event itself is, both to each of our organizations, but in the fight against AIDS. I mean, we are going down the coast of California, inland in California, through little towns, bigger towns. We are raising the visibility and the profile of HIV, and that it is a continued issue that we must care about and battle we must fight. And I feel concerned about the fact that we're not doing that this year. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to getting together again in person in 2021.
Yeah. Definitely HIV and AIDS is not over. I know that in the media team, we share with the media that in the 7 days it takes us to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles, by the time we get to Los Angeles, more than 700 people nationwide will test positive for HIV. So it's still happening to this day, unfortunately.
Yes, I didn't know that statistic, Gil. That's pretty sobering. But, you know, the good news is in part thanks to what the AIDS LifeCycle and its predecessor, the California AIDS Ride, have made possible over the years. Both the foundation and the center have implemented innovative programs that have actually made a difference in the incidence of new HIV infections. Taking advantage of new treatments, new approaches to care to get people in treatment and help them stay on treatment means we have been able to reduce the incidence of HIV infections significantly for many years, for decades. The center is one of the largest HIV test sites in the country. And for many decades, our positivity rate was about 4%. So of everybody we tested, 4% were testing positive. And that was a very high number. In other test sites across the country and other places, it would be a fraction of a percentage point. So that meant we were getting to the right people. Today, we're around 1%. So we've made enormous progress. And we can't let things like COVID-19 stop our progress.
Mm-hmm. Hear, hear. Lorri, what is your favorite part of the ride each year?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard to say because there are so many. You know, I love being with all the people. I love all the hugs. I mean, boy, if we can't hug each other again, that's going to really be bad for me because I am a big hugger. But you know, I love the scenery. I got to say, Red Dress Day. That is certainly one of my favorites. And then, of course, on this day, day 6, after the evening program every year, we have the Candlelight Vigil.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very important thing to continue for a whole host of reasons. For those of us of a certain vintage who lived through the worst years of the AIDS epidemic and who lost so many men that we loved, our partners, our best friends, our brothers, our fathers, our sons, that's an important time to remember. But we now have a lot of people on this ride, including LGBT people who didn't ever know that. They don't even know anybody with HIV, or at least they think they don't. And that's important for them to experience as well. And it's an important part of our history that we can't ever forget. And even though I'm glad we have a new generation of of people today for whom all of that trauma is not a reality, I don't want us to ever forget it.
Right. And we're going to be hosting the Candlelight Vigil tonight at 7 p.m. right here. So everyone come back here at 7 p.m. tonight to be part of that. You mentioned Red Dress Day, Lorri. Yes, last night we did have the first ever Red Dress Day walk-off. Any special moment?
Saw that, but I'm telling you, there was some pretty hideous stuff going on there.
You know, you and I have seen our share of red dresses. It's amazing that, you know, the gay men outdo the straight women on Red Dress Day every year, hands down.
Well, let's face it, when it comes to camp, nobody's going to beat the queen. And you got to love that. But hey, everybody gets into it. And as I often will comment on during the ride from camp stage at night, I always love the first time straight guys. Some of them get into it, but the more common reaction is, you know, I'm here with all these gay people and I support this. This is important, but I'm not doing that Red Dress Day. Well, year two, the straight guys are out dragging the gay guys.
Yeah.
And speaking as a lesbian who did not get the gene for that kind of campiness dress up, but who enjoys it, I thank the many gay men who have helped me over the years.
Oh, I may have conjured up some photos of you participating in Red Dress Day. I know I want to embarrass you. Sorry about that, Lorri. I know that you have done the Centurion outfit. There you are, Centurion, flanked by some hunky guys. Now, Centurion, for those of you who don't know, is the name of the team of the Los Angeles LGBT Center, hence Centurion. Oh, and here you are with, in the middle of a plethora of beauty pageant drag queens. Of course, you're the only queen there, the real queen there, Lorri. I think you have one of you and Joe Hollendonor. Love him. I love the fact that he takes part in this also. But I think my
I have to say, you know, we've had a lot of great colleagues over the years running the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, but I think Joe has done the best job of getting in to Red Dress Day. And I don't know if you all have seen some of his performances as Ginger to help raise money for the ride, but it's a little scary, but quite impressive.
Right. And I think, you know, my favorite red dress outfit of yours has to be this one. If those of you who are old enough to know Bo Derek in the movie 10, you are rocking that bikini body, Lorri. That is quite an outfit. I think that should be your profile picture in LinkedIn or something like that.
You know, I actually have a team of cyclists one year to thank for that. That was their outfit, and they all rode Red Dress Day in that outfit, and they brought an extra one for me. So I wore it that year, and I pull it out every few years and wear it again.
Well, thank you so much, Lorri, for letting me share those embarrassing photos of you. I can't wait to see what we're going to wear next year on the ride. So we just have a few minutes left. And of course, like I said before earlier, Lorri is going to be taking some of your questions. Let's see, I'm going to look here. Lorri, can you tell us in which ways the Center's legal services is helping advocate for the Black community?
Oh my gosh. Well, our legal services department is much more than a bunch of lawyers. They also are doing a ton of important policy work. But some of the areas where, actually, I haven't talked much about this work in this particular session today, but they run our anti-violence project. And they have a lot of transgender women of color who have been victims of not only anti-racist, anti-Black violence, but anti-queer violence, and so they count on our center to help advocate for them with the law enforcement agencies to ensure that people are prosecuted if victims, if perpetrators can be caught. They also work to ensure that victims are getting the care that they need to be in a safe place. They operate our transgender economic empowerment program, which helps trans people get decent jobs that respect the dignity of who they are. And we're also doing things like, our center has 10 locations across Los Angeles. And earlier, gosh, I sort of lost track of time. I guess it was late last year, we opened up our new site in South Los Angeles, which is right in the heart of the Black community in Los Angeles. Also, significant Latino populations there. We have a site in called Mi Centro in Boyle Heights as well. But Legal Services is delivering legal counsel and advice there. And there's so much more. I wasn't expecting this particular question, so I'm not totally boned up on any new things they might have been doing, but this is a long time effort of our Legal Services Department.
I also should mention that, in our Legal Services team, they are also helping victims of domestic violence, whether, it's, I'm not sure if most Black relationships are part of that, but, we are saving lives. We are protecting lives in our legal services every day. So thank you, Lorri.
Those programs don't have any racial through line, but it's just yet another thing that Legal Services does, and as does our Mental Health Services Department. We actually developed the nation's first program for same-sex domestic violence back in the 80s, and have continued to do it today. And the movement to stop domestic violence in our community is probably about 10 years behind the movement in the straight community. We don't have shelters that are dedicated for our community, and these are some of the things that the center does that are really important, but a lot of people don't know about.
Lorri, Michael Edwards asks, how important is the visibility of AIDS LifeCycle to the foundation and to the center?
Oh, I think it's really important. As I mentioned earlier, it's important from a substantive perspective, in terms of creating understanding and educating people about HIV and AIDS. But it also brings such a wide swath of donors to our organizations that in many instances didn't know much about us. Now, what we do know is that donors give to people. They don't necessarily give because it's benefiting the center and the foundation. So that's where our writers and our roadies become so critically important. But we get a lot of media on the ride, not as much as we used to in some years, because sometimes some in the media think AIDS is old news, and that's part of what the ride does to counteract those kinds of views. But people tune in from all over the country and all over the world during the week of the ride, and we've had some of that happening this week during AIDS LifeCycle at Home.
Aurelia, if it's the same Aurelia I know, I love Aurelia. Aurelia asked, at the beginning of the pandemic, Lorri, the city of Los Angeles asked the help of the center to continue HIV STI testing when the city was focusing on COVID testing. Do you know, is the center getting city funds still for its help during this crisis?
Aurelia is raising an issue. We were having a fight. It was actually with the county earlier this year, because suddenly the county, for the first time in decades, in the midst of the worst STI epidemic in a decade, was suddenly going to change its funding. And as a result, we were going to have to cut our services for HIV and mostly for other sexually transmitted infection testing. And for HIV too, because suddenly they wanted us to pay for all the lab costs, which was seven figures. We rallied our community, and I have to say the AIDS Life Cycle community was right there the instant we needed them, and overwhelmed the Department of Public Health with calls, and that position was reversed. And so now we do have the funding that we had hoped to get, not as much as we need, because they're still not paying us. We are subsidizing the county by over $1 million every year in that testing, but it's critical because, and now our testing expertise is even more important to the county because contact tracing is important in COVID. And who are the best contact tracers? The center is the LA's best contact tracer. We are the shining star in their STI program, and nobody knows how to contact trace like we do. That's going to be important in COVID as well.
Mm-hmm. Adam asks, you're often on the side of the road cheering on the cyclists. Lorri, do you have a favorite spot to cheer on riders and why?
Oh, I have to say the top of Quadbuster. Because
with your cowbell.
Right, I've got my cowbell because I've learned I get hoarse over the years if I continue to yell at Quadbuster at the top. And I get there. I don't get there right at the beginning because the speedy dudes, they're not having any problem on Quadbuster. But I get there, probably after 20% of the cyclists have gone by. And I stay there until the caboose. Because it's the cyclists who are having the greater trouble, who need people cheering them on up that hill. And I've seen everything at the top of Quadbuster. I have seen people go up and down 20 times. Crazy. I have seen people bawling as they come to the top because it's a challenge. I have seen women lift up their blouses and flash me. Favorite moments. People are, even the people who are crying are in good humor. And, even the people who are walking and pushing their bikes are in good humor. And I admire and respect every single one of them. So that has to be one of my favorite spots to stand and cheer.
Well, Richard Lagunti asks, what will it take you, Lorri, to get back on a bike for the ride?
Oh. Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know.